Hey everybody, happy Monday. Welcome back to another episode of LonsTV. I am going to talk today about the Dexter finale from last night, and there will be spoilers. There's no way to talk about the Dexter finale the way I want to without sort of ruining it for you if you didn't see it. So if you have not watched the last Dexter or this season of Dexter and you're saving it, it's on your DVR, whatever, don't click stop right now. Don't keep watching because I'm going to blow the finale for you, and I don't want to do that if you haven't already seen it. But you should watch it. Come on, get with the program. It's already Monday. Before I get into that, I do want to talk a little. I'm making my best of 2010 movie list for this week in movies right now, and I'm having a really hard time with it because there's two types of movies, and they're both sort of fighting for the lower spots on the list. I know what the top 5 or 6 is, but the lower ones, I'm sort of debating. It's kind of tough because there's some movies from this year that I really sort of admired. I thought they were well made. I thought they were well crafted. I enjoyed them for what they were, but they didn't grab me. I didn't love them. I just thought, well, that was a good movie. And then there are movies that I really loved, but that are stupid. And that I know are stupid, but that I just kind of really enjoyed and had a good time with. And so I'm debating, like, where do I give those bottom spots over to? Like, do I give them to is it my favorite movies of the year, or is it what I actually think are, like, the best? And how do you even make an objective decision about, like, what's the best? Like, maybe one of these stupid movies is made, better, or is more successful at its core mission than one of these, like, great Hollywood films. It's tough, and I try to write these lists in sort of a judgment-free vacuum where I'm not worried about what people will say to me about the list afterwards. Like, will everybody disagree with this or that? I try to get that out of my head and just be totally honest about my feelings, but it's really hard to do that, even though, I realize I'm putting too much thought into it, and I'm not sight and sound, and this does not have to stand the test of time for the next, 2 decades as, arbiter of great films. I can always just lie if I leave something off that was really great, and that in a year everyone comes to recognize as movie of the year. I can just say I had it on my list and nobody will go back and check anyway. So I'm putting too much thought into it, clearly. Let's talk about Dexter. I had made a previous video where I had sort of complained about this season, but I remained hopeful. I think there were 3 episodes left at that point, and I was like, okay, now we've met Jordan Chase, the main villain of the season. Johnny Lee Miller's a pretty good actor. It's going to come together. And now the season is over, and it did not come together. And actually, if anything, I think the finale was worse than maybe the rest of the season, and easily the worst Dexter finale we've ever had. I'm really starting to doubt whether I'm going to get into season 6 now. I mean, if it doesn't start strong, that may be the signal that Dexter has just kind of jumped the shark, or whatever the Miami version of jumping the gator, whatever he would do. But anyway, I'm just starting to worry about the future of the show at this point, because this season was just so off and so sort of just weak, even just by the show's own standard. The elimination of Jordan Chase last night, sort of his murder, that's usually the big moment in the season of Dexter, is he's been facing off against this main adversary, and then they finally face off, and that's usually a big climactic moment, and it just felt totally flat to me. I mean, the old one knife missing from the case, and then Dexter's got it and uses it to cut the rope, and it was just so transparent. I mean, you can see it coming, and after he's dead, you realize well, he wasn't really ever that menacing a villain. I mean, what do we ever see him do? We never really got to understand him internally and what makes him tick. He was always just kind of this fill in your favorite motivational speaker cliche, and he's got all these bodyguards, and he used to be a fat kid, and it's all just kind of details just sort of thrown out there. I never really felt a connection to that character. His death meant absolutely nothing to me. There was no major last-second reversal at all. I mean, that's sort of the show's trademark is, the noose tightens and Dexter gets closer and closer and closer and closer to getting revealed, and then he comes up with last-minute pivot, clever improvisations to, get out of it, and then somebody else is left looking like the murderer, and that always happens, and it's very satisfying, and it's what makes Dexter, is that you're following him, and he's a genius, and you get that excitement of watching him escape over and over again. And this year, we really had none of that. I mean, there was no great last-second reversal. You could have predicted what would happen in the finale sort of from the middle of the season, you could have said, well, he's probably going to help Lumen finish killing all these guys. The last guy, the leader of that group, is probably going to be something of a challenge, but they'll figure it out. And then Lumen and he will either stay together and be a new couple, or she'll take off, and that's exactly what happened. And I don't feel like we had any of that. Obviously, the shock of Season 4, you're not going to be able to come up with something equally shocking, because you probably couldn't. I mean, you couldn't just have major characters dropping every season finale. People would be onto you. But they didn't. It was like they didn't even try. And the finale was just like, meh, okay, so it all wrapped up. Happy ending. See you next year. And it was really just a letdown. Every single plot line last night, every single plot line of the season ended in that same way, in some sort of deus ex machina. Nothing really clever about it, just like, let's wrap this up. So if you think about it, I mean, like, Dexter and Lumen, they just murdered Chase. They're in this room, this torture room. Deb, the cop, comes down, has a gun drawn on them. You're like, well, this is it. I mean, this is he can't get out of this. I mean, he's going to have to come up with something totally bafflingly ingenious as a way to explain why he's there, why they're covered in blood. I mean, he's basically going to have to tell his sister he's a murderer. And you think, well, forget this. This is going to be the greatest season ever. We're going to see something amazing right now. And then Deb lets them go. I mean, just like, oh, I'm going to just leave because I've seen the tape and I know that you got tortured and what you went through. And she just takes off and doesn't investigate. I mean, it's baffling. I mean, now she's basically committing a crime herself, because it's obvious she was there and she caught these two murderers, and she's going to, like, clean up the scene to make it look like they weren't there. And what about the car accident that's outside? There's an overturned car. There was obviously somebody in it. It's probably got Dexter's fingerprints or DNA in it somewhere. I mean, that's just not going to get investigated at all. We're just going to drop that completely. It's just such a cheat. Also, Dexter called the public office to find out where that camp was and who owned it. So there's got to be a record of that conversation. That guy's obviously going to remember him, and he said he was from Miami Metro Homicide. I mean, unless they're going to use this whole thing to propel next season, it's just a completely, like, let's just leave this totally open-ended and lazily kind of write our way out of it. Quinn's cop friend murdered in this van by Dexter, and, at first they're looking at Quinn for it, and then Dexter basically fudges the evidence to get Quinn out. Quinn thanks him, and that's it? I mean, they're not going to keep investigating? Like, who killed that guy? And doesn't Quinn know that Dexter did it? He's not going to tell his girlfriend, Dexter's sister, like, I think your brother may have been involved. I mean, nothing? Like, it's just going to go away forever? And even the LaGuerta-Batista marriage plotline ended like that, where it's just like, let's just get him out of it. He's like, hey, you want to start over? And she goes, yeah. And then they kiss. Like, that's not how marriages resolve conflict. They're at some party, and they're like, let's pretend like the last year of constant fighting never happened. Like, all the betrayal and all the things that have been blown up into such a dramatic arc for the whole season, and then they're just, like, magicked out of it because the writers decide they're bored with it now. I mean, that is just, it's so lazy and it's so cheap, and after making you wait 11 episodes to get to this point, and then just kind of dropping the ball is just, it makes you angry as a fan. It makes you feel cheated. Like, you spent all this time and you were made promises that things were going to build in a certain way, and then they just let them drop. So I'm pretty disappointed. Usually when you take a long-running show and then there's a dip in quality, you can still say, well, it's not as good as it was, but it's still better than most shows on TV. Like, even The Simpsons at this point, it's been 20-plus years. It's clearly not as good as it was in, like, 2 through 9, like the essential seasons, but it's still good. It's still better than pretty much any other animated show on TV, and it's still very watchable, and Dexter is not there. Like, I don't even feel like this is good. Like, it's not as good as it was. It's just not good anymore. If season 1 was season 5, like if they'd been transposed, I don't think I would even still be watching the show. So, really, really disappointing way to wrap up the season. I'm losing faith in Dexter. I hope they come back next year ready to just kill it, and it was just an off season. That is it for today's LonsTV. I will see everyone tomorrow. Please do, if you enjoy the show, please do subscribe. It makes me feel good every time I see that subscriber count click up another notch, and I really appreciate it. So thanks, everybody, and I will see you tomorrow.